Gareth, I want to talk about something really important. I want to talk about the dollar, right? There is always been this inverse relationship with the dollar versus Bitcoin. Okay. The DXY, talk to me about what's going on with the DXY. And then what do you think about this inverse relationship with the dollar versus Bitcoin? Because there are some sources that are saying that that relationship is starting to soften. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think at least in the near term, it does seem there's this divergence that we've seen with Bitcoin away not only from the dollar, but specifically even the stock market, right? So we've seen such amazing runs in Nvidia stock and Microsoft and everything, and Bitcoin's been stuck. And even with good news, right? We've heard the BlackRock news, we heard the the XRP news, and Bitcoin still couldn't get out of its own way in terms of breaking out above 31,000. Now, 31,000 epic level of resistance. I've talked about that for the last couple months, and it's literally been hanging out there for a few months at this point. If I show my screen here, I don't know if we can pop it up.
Yep.
But here's your dollar chart, and what I find fascinating about this is so number one, look at the pattern, right? We had the big fall. We hit this line. We bounced. We then broke the line. We came to the next line. We then bounced back to the former line, came down, bounced one more time, broke. And so what the chart's telling me is that we're likely headed back to this level on the US dollar, 102.45, 102.40, whatever you want to call it right there. That would be what I would call a retrace to the scene of the crime, which is exactly what happened here, right? We broke this white line, we came down to the next one, then we retraced to that former line. Now, what's interesting about today's price action is yesterday Jerome Powell came out, and you could argue he was a little bit more dovish on his statements. That generally means a weaker dollar. And early today, we saw a weaker dollar, but there has been a huge reversal in the dollar right now, and we are screaming higher. Now, I'm hearing from my little birds that I listen to that this could have something to do with Japan. They're talking about potentially taking away the peg, the yield curve control that they've had for, I mean, how many generations they've had this, since the 80s or whenever they had it. But that's a big deal here.
Explain that to me a little bit further, Gareth, for those that don't understand what you're saying.
So Japan's basically locked in interest rates at zero for decades at this point, right? And so they're seeing a huge surge in inflation, which is forcing their hand to say, oh my goodness, to get inflation under control, we may have to loosen that. And that changes the whole dynamic with currencies, with assets in general, because again, it's something the markets have been used to for so long. It was always something you could bank on, and now it potentially is going to switch.
Wow.
Tomorrow morning, we'll hear from the Japanese central bank on this.
And how does the Japanese central bank, is it just worldwide commodities trading that really like drives that, or why is that going to be so important for the United States?
Yeah, so it's important because of the dollar in relation to the dollar. If they loosen their yields and let their interest rates float up, that changes the whole dynamic with their currency and with the US dollar. Magic might have some insights on this as well. But there's been so many different trades that have been established that you trade, the disparity in the yen versus the dollar and so forth. Contango is a big term that you hear with it. And yeah, anyways, it's actually pretty shocking. In fact, I want to show you one more thing on my chart here. This is actually remarkable. Take a look at what's going on to the S&P. So the S&P was soaring today, and then look at this.
Wah, wah.
Right? Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about a move from 459 on the spiders down to 452. You don't see moves like that usually on the S&P intraday. That is a huge move, and that tells you this is a big deal to the markets. And what I find fascinating about it is if we go to the daily chart, there's this trend line going back here, this channel, in fact, from the lows connected to the lows and parallel to these highs here. And look at where that reversal is coming in. And that, at least in technicals, and Magic can tell you, when you get a candle like that, which is basically engulfing the previous multiple candles, that's never a good thing technically, especially when it comes with huge amount of volume.
Do you have anything behind, Gareth, why you think that might have happened today? Is it because of yesterday's Fed meeting, or is there something more to it?
Just that, I mean, the central bank, so the Fed meeting for the U.S., the equivalent is tomorrow morning for the Japanese central bank. And so I don't know why it slipped out early, but someone leaked this news out, and we'll see if it's true tomorrow. Most likely will be, but something's leaking out here, and the markets are freaking out a little bit about it.
I think it's incredible. Before I ever got into, so I started in stocks before I merged my way over into crypto and then just dove head and hands into crypto. But I think it's really interesting how exactly what you're talking about, that Japan uses the yen, right? Yeah, how something like another currency all the way across the world can have so much impact on our markets over here. And it does show you how much things interconnected matter. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a lot going on as it relates to the dollar and people trying to back away from the dollar. And people ask, like, well, why is it such a big deal? Well, ultimately, as the global reserve status, which we have as of right now, which looks like I don't know how long we're going to hold that. That is the number. That's it, right? We are in power partially because of that. Obviously, our military as well. But I think it's going to be interesting as we see more and more countries kind of stepping back from the dollar to see what happens. It's kind of a scary thing. It gets us into the CBDCs without me diving into that. There is a lot happening, and you need to watch the worldwide stage. That's part of the reason you should definitely continue to pay attention to Gareth. Gareth, great analysis, brother. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, man.